We're going to be talking about this, and most of you will recognize what that is. Maybe all of you will recognize what that is. It's part of the Western Wall. And I had nothing else to do but start another hobby. And so I started to sculpture. And so basically, this is, you take a 2-inch foam, very firm foam, cover it with fiberglass material for strength, and then add the molding putty that can then be chiseled, or as long as it's soft, can be molded. And so that's basically what this is. I want to talk about the Western Wall because I want to talk about past, present, and future of the Western Wall. It's also called the Wailing Wall. You have people there all the time, day and night, and they're basically praying for the temple to be back. That's their number one prayer. They want a temple on the Temple Mount. So let's talk about the history just briefly. The Western Wall is a sacred site in Jerusalem, Old City, that dates back to the 1st century BC. That's when Herod the Great had it built on surrounding the 35 acres. I should say enlarged. There was one before, not nearly as big, but now it's 35 acres that is surrounded by Herod's wall. So it's a retaining wall to support the expansion of the second temple complex. And there you see it, what it looked like in the time of Jesus. It's humongous. It is absolutely huge. There's a couple of ways to get in. One is through this staircase over here, leading up to the temple. There's a bridge over here, leading from the city up straight into the temple area. And there are other entrances, a total of 8 gates. This part is what today is the Western Wall. That's it. There's about 1/3 of it below that was filled by the Romans in the year 70 when they came and destroyed it and just filled it up, 1/3 of it. So that's floor level. And then the top third was taken down. So you won't see that either. At places, that wall is 200 feet tall. That's like 20 stories. It's unbelievable how huge that thing was. The Romans destroyed the second temple in 70 AD, but the Western Wall survived because it was too massive to completely destroy. So they left this part. This is actually just like a quarter of the Wailing Wall. You know, it's much, much larger than that. So they just left it. They didn't destroy it. The Herodian street along the temple wall, today, what it looks like today is right there. Herod built this street, paved it all around. Well, at least on 3 sides, because on the eastern side, there's a steep decline down to the Kidron Valley. So there wasn't really room for a big street. But the other sides had that. And it's interesting what you see. You see, for instance, here, 4 shops. I went there, and in this shop right here, they actually have a chiseled out of rock, chiseled out a loop where you could put a string around, like for sheep and goats. Those were basically where they sold the doves and the sheep and the goats and other animals for the offering up on the Temple Mount. So people came there before they went up and bought their animal, went up to sacrifice it. But it also is the support from that bridge that I showed you before. Not the bridge, but the staircase. The staircase that went all the way up. Now, you notice they left in the back, they left a pile just to show what it looked like when they first came. And it wasn't until after the 6-day war they had access and cleaned it out. But they left that pile as a reminder. But they found something else interesting, and that was that this part here is all caved in. And they said, why is this caved in? What's going on there? They dug down and they found a canal, like a sewage canal. And inside that sewage canal, they found oil lamps and seals and jars and all kind of pieces that were broken, that were taken down there by the Jews in the hope that they can escape the Romans that had come to kill. Unfortunately, they all got killed. the Romans found out where the entrance is to this canal. They went inside and slaughtered everybody. And then over the years it just filled up, and so when the Israelis cleaned it out, they found all this stuff. And they found something very interesting. They found this tiny golden bell, just tiny golden bell. And it goes ding, 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 really, really quiet. And what was it from? It was from the seam of the high priest. Down here, he's got all those bells. So when he walks, all those bells go cling, 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 cling all the time, you know. And the reason for that was, at least that's what they say, when the high priest goes into the Holy of Holies once a year, on the Day of Atonement, behind the curtain that separates the holy from the Holy of Holies, where the Ark of the Covenant stands. And he goes there with the blood of the goat that was just killed and sprinkles that blood with his arm. And before he goes behind the curtain, he has to go through a whole row of rituals, cleansing rituals, different clothing rituals, in order to be acceptable for that. And so they put a string or rope around his ankle, that in case God slays him dead, that he didn't do one of those correctly, that they can pull him out. Because they can't go in there, because God would slay them immediately, it would be dead. And so they listened carefully. Do we still hear the clinging of those little bells? Of course, this high priest was also slain, because everyone was slain in that canal when the Romans went through. Another interesting thing is that right at the top of the corner stood a trumpet player. And we know that because this piece right here fell down and was at the bottom, way down at the bottom, where when the Israelis cleaned it up, they found that piece. And it says, the place of the trumpet player. And they found the other stones around it, so they know exactly that it was at this very place that he stood. And by the way, all those beautiful designs and colors is not just imagination. Because when they went through all this rubble and stones, they found pieces that still had those colors and ornaments. And so they know exactly what Herod the Great did. He really made a tremendous job on decorating all of this. Remember in Matthew 24 when they walk out and the disciples say to Jesus, Jesus, do you notice how beautiful everything looks? And Jesus turns to them and says, I tell you, not one stone will be remaining on another. And that's exactly what happened in the year 70. That generation in the year 70 was gone. But that's exactly what it looked like. It was so phenomenal that the Caesars said, when they take Jerusalem, don't destroy the temple. But they didn't listen. They burned it anyways, and they took it apart. Why? Because they wanted to get to the gold. When it burned down, the gold went down between the cracks of the floor, and so they literally didn't leave one stone on top of the other because they wanted to get to their reward of that war, get to the gold. For hundreds of years, Jews prayed in the small section of the wall that was visible. And what I mean by that is, when the pictures first came out in the late 1800s, this is a picture from 1880s, and you can see the ladies praying here, and then the man back here. But look how small it was. There was another wall here, and so they only had this space. Today, they of course took all that away, and it's a huge plaza. You'll see it in just a little bit. But they were always present, even if it was against the law, they were there. You couldn't keep them away from that wall. That was so important to them. The Western Wall is the closest remaining structure to the Holy of Holies, the inner sanctuary of the temple. It is considered the holiest place accessible to the Jews. And that's the reason why they go there, even today. It's the closest that they can come. Now, they can go on the Temple Mount, but they can't pray. They're not allowed to pray. Now, just recently, they actually started to pray up there, and they got away with it. So they keep pushing. And the boundaries further and further. But for the longest time, they couldn't do it. But there they can pray. And so they went there to pray, and they do that today, and they do it every single day. This is what the wall looks like. And you can see, a bunch of people, but there are many, many more, many times. However, in the 1860s, the British explorer Wilson discovered an arch opening to the left of the western wall, leading to the support arch of the bridge, which was constructed by King Herod. And that's the reason why you have this opening to the left, right here. But it's only the very tip of a big arch. And what was that? Well, it's right in that corner, and there you have the whole arch. That's the arch that was discovered by Wilson. That's why they call this the Wilson's Arch. And it is humongous, but it's all filled up to that level that I showed you. And so all you have is just enough to walk in, where it was 3 times as long. That's the Wilson's Arch, and I want to show you what it looks inside. So there it is again. You walk through this entry, and that's what you see. The inside of that arch. It's huge. Again, Herod the Great built it. And so when that was discovered and cleaned out, now the rabbis and those who want to study the Word go inside, because it's even closer to the Holy of Holies. It's as close as you can get from down below. So the present time, ever since 1967, when Israel took the old city of Jerusalem back, Jews and Gentiles alike have full access to pray at the Western Wall. And so every time I take a group there, we go down there to the wall, and they give you a little beanie. You have to wear that, but you can go right up to the wall. You can pray there. I go every time. I put my hand on the wall and pray for the salvation of the Jews. And biblically, that is exactly what's going to happen. So here you have one of the feasts. When they have a feast, the Bible talks about 7 feasts. But there are actually, they added some more feasts. And every time there's a feast, tens of thousands of people show up at the wall because they want to have the blessings of the high priest. And so they're there and they sing and they dance and they wait for the blessings of the high priest. Back in his first term, the president went there to pray. And so anyone can go down there and anybody can pray. Now the women have their own section to the right. The men have their section to the left, so they don't mix. There is a third temple frenzy going on. I already referred to that. It's like everybody says, we want the temple. And, here somebody drew this temple right on top of the western wall there because that's what they imagined. Here this guy actually put a picture on top of the Golden Dome and showed this is where the temple has to be. Here's another one that kind of projected the temple right on the temple place right there. They're actually planning a train station to stop on the Temple Mount because they say the nations of the world will come and pray at the temple, and so there has to be a connection. They built a train recently, and so one of the stations is going to be on the Temple Mount. Netanyahu, the third temple, and the Messiah, it goes hand in hand. Many Jews say when the Messiah comes, he will bring the temple. Others say, no, we have to build the temple for the Messiah when he comes. So that's going back and forth. But the people are giving money like crazy towards that temple. Some rabbis are proclaiming that the President Trump will rebuild the third temple. Isn't that interesting? When President Trump had his first term, you could get a coin. It looks golden, it's not golden, but because it was relatively cheap. But on one side it has the temple. And it says the temple coin. On the other side, it has the seven lampstand, seven-armed lampstand. It has the seal of Israel, the lion here. And then the American seal, because right here is President Trump. Now, behind him is King Cyrus. You know who King Cyrus was? He not only allowed the Israelites to go back, he was the king of, today it's Iran, it was Persia back then. Not only did he allow the Israelites to go back, but gave them money to build the temple. And so, if you look at a close-up, there's Trump in the foreground and Cyrus in the background. And it says, and he charged me to build him a house in Jerusalem. So you can see the Israelites are pretty excited about Trump in connection with the temple. And I heard the president say he's not against having a temple built. Of course, there's a big problem because where the temple is supposed to be built possibly is the Dome of the Rock. So what's going to happen with that? They have those stickers that you can get with the temple. And everybody's encouraged. Start wearing those stickers everywhere, and on your back, and your backpack, wherever you can put that. It's all about the temple. There's a sign in Tel Aviv. Congratulations, Trump, make Israel great. Isn't that amazing? All items necessary for the third temple are already produced by the Temple Institute. How many of you were in Israel? Oh wow, that's maybe a third of you. That's great. So I'm sure you went to the Institute. When you go into the Temple Institute, they show you all the items that are prepared by Jewish scholars, the biblical way to be used in the third temple. And so everything is handmade, whether it's the harp or the clothing for all the priests, including the high priest. Everything is there, including the golden lampstand, which is very impressive. It's huge, pure gold. And it sits outside under a big plexiglass protection. And then the Ark of the Covenant. Now the Ark of the Covenant, they are saying, this will not go into the temple. This is just a replica. Because we know where the real one is, and when the temple is there, we're going to get it and put it there. They're not saying where. Some are saying the real one is actually underneath the temple. There are many, many caves under the temple. Water reservoirs and other caves all over the place. I mean, hundreds of them. Very, very protected. They could be easily, where you can't find it. But they claim that some rabbis actually, after 1967, went there, found it, but made sure that no one else can see it. So they claim that they know exactly where it is. We'll find out, I guess. The future. We know for sure that there will be a third temple built. Why? Because Daniel 9:27 demands a third temple. And Jesus confirms it in Matthew 24:15, where it says, so, when you see standing in the holy place, that's in the temple, the abomination that causes desolation spoken through the prophet Daniel, let the reader understand, and let those who are in Judea flee to the mountains. Why? Because, as you know, halfway through 3.5 years, Antichrist will turn against the Jews. First, he was like their Messiah. Now, he's turning against them and starts to slaughter them. And so Jesus says, don't even go upstairs to get your hat. Just go in the wilderness. Get away quick. Otherwise, you will be slaughtered too. So there's that beautiful vision of the next temple that the Jews have. 3.5 years into the tribulation, Antichrist will turn against the Jews and set himself up in the temple to be worshipped as God. In 2 Thessalonians, the Antichrist will oppose and exalt himself above all that is called God or that is worshipped. He will sit in the temple of God and claim to be God. He will demand worship of him. And of course, at that time, the Jews say, we were wrong. You are not the Messiah. Halfway through the tribulation, many Jews will flee to Petra in the country of Jordan. Petra is a deserted rock city that was built in the 3rd century BC by the Nabateans. Since the 8th century, Petra is uninhabited. God has prepared a place and is huge. There's room for hundreds of thousands of people, and they can go there and hide away. Isaiah 26 says something interesting. Go, my people, enter your rooms and shut the doors behind you. Hide yourself for a little while until his wrath has passed by. There's God's wrath is coming, and God is telling the Jews, in order to avoid the wrath, go and hide yourself in Petra. So Petra is, the temples are incredible, or the different places that they have built there are incredible, beautiful, and still there. On the right, you see what Petra looks from distance. You can see it's covered by mountains all the way around. It's protected well. On the left, the entrance. That's the only entrance. A tiny little entrance where you can barely go in and out. A little wagon can just barely get through there. So it can easily be closed off, as the Bible says. When Jesus returns after the 7-year tribulation, he will also go to Petra and pick up the Jews. At that time, the Jews will have accepted Jesus as Lord and Savior. There are actually churches that have placed massive amounts of Bibles in secret places in Petra, so that when the Jews get there, they can read the whole Bible and be saved. In Isaiah 63, we read, who is this coming from Edom, from Basra? Basra is the greater area where Petra is in, with his garments stained crimson. That's an identifier, right? We know that from Revelation. The garments stained crimson, that's Jesus. Who is this robed in splendor, striding forward in the greatness of his strength? It is I proclaiming victory, mighty to save. Who else can save? It's Jesus who is coming there. Why are your garments red like those of one treading the winepress? I have trodden the winepress alone from the nations. No one was with me. I trampled them in my anger and trod them down in my wrath. Their blood splattered on my garments, and I stained all my clothing. It was for me the day of vengeance. The year for me to redeem had come. I looked, but there was no one to help. I was appalled that no one gave support. So my own arm achieved salvation for me, and my own wrath sustained me. I trampled the nations in my anger, in my wrath. I made them drunk and poured their blood on the ground. We read that in Revelation at the end of the tribulation. That's exactly what Jesus will do. There he is on his white horse. Revelation 19 says, his eyes are like blazing fire, and on his head are many crowns. He has a name written on him that no one knows but he himself. He's dressed in a robe dipped in blood, and his name is the Word of God. We know who that is. Coming out of his mouth is a sharp sword with which to strike down the nations. He will rule them with an iron scepter. He treads the winepress of the fury of the wrath of God Almighty. This picture of Jesus with the sword coming out of his mouth, most people that draw pictures of that scene put the sword in his hand, because it kind of looks weird coming out of his mouth. But we have to understand what that means. What it means is, with his word, he's going to slay them. Not with the sword. He's just going to say, be gone, and they're gone. Just like with his word, he created the world. So his power is just in the word. That's all he needs. There's one picture I found where it actually seems like it's coming out of his mouth. In Zechariah we read, and I will pour out on the house of David and the inhabitants of Jerusalem a spirit of grace and supplication. They will look on me, says Jesus, the one they have pierced, and they will mourn for him as one mourns for one and only child, and grieve bitterly for him as one grieves for the firstborn son. On that day the weeping in Jerusalem will be as great as the weeping of Hadad Rimmon in the plains of Megiddo. So a day will come when Jesus will go not only to Petra to pick up the believers there, but also to Jerusalem and show them his wounds where they have pierced him. And they will realize and recognize what happened, and they will mourn bitterly. But in the end, they will all be saved, and Jesus will take them out as well. Those who are, it's a leftover, because most of them will be killed by the Antichrist, but they manage to hide away so they won't be killed. Will Jesus save the Jews? Romans 11. I do not want you to be ignorant of this mystery, brothers and sisters, so that you may not be conceited. Israel has experienced a hardening in part until the full number of Gentiles has come in, and in this way all Israel will be saved. So all those who are left over in the life, all the Israelites, will be saved. As it is written, the deliverer will come from Zion, he will turn godlessness away from Jacob. Jacob is Israel.